Okay, so very good morning to everyone here for joining us in this first opening session of the academic part of our Utopia week. We wish to spend an interactive session with you. So we would like to say a few words, ask a few questions, present where we're at and what we're trying to do. But most importantly, we would like to hear from you, what your experience is, but not only that, not only in terms of experience, but maybe more in terms of suggestions. How to go about it, how to do the transition, what are the institutions supposed to do? So that's kind of our aim and goal today, to engage in kind of a debate that we don't have much time to do so. So I would welcome Jose Luis to open the floor. He's one of the founding fathers of the concept, so thank you for that. I don't think I ever publicly thanked you for creating the concept of planetary well-being. And he's gonna kind of guide you through the history of it and explain a little bit how it came about. Before we start with Jose Luis, I would kindly invite you to join the Mentimeter. So we have 2 or 3 questions and just the basic notion on planetary well-being. And then we're gonna hear about how the concept grew and what it's aiming to do. So if you enter www.menti.com and enter the code, it's going to guide you to the presentation. You can also just use the QR code and it leads you straight to there. Everybody successfully done it? No, we still have, I think, 2 or 3 people who are struggling to get in. Those questions are pretty intuitive. They're very short, but they help us understand also beyond our little bubble of UPF and planetary well-being as to what the opinions are. Everybody that's joining us on Zoom, please feel free to go to questions too. More or less okay? Everybody in? Right now, yes. Right now, no. You can see the question, please? Okay, beautiful. It means it works. Sometimes it doesn't. Those are not supposed to be tricky questions. Those are the questions that you kind of put forward what's the first thing that comes to your mind. Because we're finding ourselves in times of transition, and all of those definitions that we used to think that we know what universities are supposed to do are kind of changing with the times. I like the word example. Yeah. Yeah, training. I like the word educate too, because it's beyond training and teaching, and it's and the values that surprised me. The code 2565806. 2565806. It's on the top of the slide every single time when the slide moves. Yes.
Welcome those of you who have just arrived. We are in a Mentimeter session. If you go to menti.com with your phone, you have the code up there. And we are just in the first question, so you're invited to join us and give your answers.
We didn't reach far yet, no. For the time being, I really love the way that we can see that educate, role model, values, and progress are one of the most important ones. And that's a vast difference from what we saw 15 years ago. It was basically knowledge transfer of things as they are, not much innovation, and it was kind of stiff in its understanding of what the framework is for higher education, and it's changing because the values part was not very strong. Now it's one of the strongest if you take a look at the world cloud, and it's okay, it's not a lot of us, but still it's kind of very focused on a different part of the role of universities, right? So I just wanted kind of to see this with you because planetary well-being is exactly about that, about the change, about the values, first and foremost, and about the progress, right? Has everybody put their input already? I think so, more or less. No, not yet. We're still doing it. Okay, let's do this. Okay. Do you want to say a word or two, actually? Because this is interesting about what you see.
No, I just insisting on what you just said. I think that, well, some of them, as it happens, some of them are actually partly the same, education or educate. Yeah. Now educate was in the center. Now it's education that replaced it. But of course, that comes together. Maybe there's a subtle distinction between the two of them, but they are basically the same. now values are a little bit smaller than they were.
That I would like them to be.
Yeah, no, but it's okay. I mean, that's what it is. So on the other hand, example has became a little bit bigger. And well, in any case, so these are the, as you know, we cannot take this as a, well, any scientific value, but this is the immediate responses that you got, that you gave. And I think it gives us all an idea of what the majority of you and those online, who I don't know how many people we have online, but
21 online, I don't know, but 21 participating in the Mentimeter.
So it gives us a first glimpse of the kind of immediate reaction that you have, over which we will work later.
Okay, so when talking about sustainability, what are the universities supposed to do? So in this sustainability transition, everybody plays its role, right? The consumers, the producers, the government, the policymakers in general. And what about university, specifically for the sustainability transition? What are they or we supposed to do? Just one thought, one word, whatever comes to your mind. But what is the exact role in this train that we're riding right now in the sustainability transition? Because I find that we're really not speaking that much about, in the transition, what the university is supposed to do. So yes, its role in general, but yeah, influence is a strong one. Setting standards. The role model came back, like in the previous one. All of these answers gave us basically a basis to also discuss between Utopia universities as to what of those roles, which ones are the most important, because when you take a look at role model and lead, they're very close in terms of what you're trying to say. So it's very easy to discern in what the expectation is actually at the end of the day from the university as an institution. Okay, role model is a really strong one. Providing information, sustainability courses, and lead. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, the role model, right? I have a feeling that we kind of forgot about it in between, that we started educating for the labor market in a way without wanting to do so. But we forgot about the role of university as the leader of changes in the society, basically, what the university used to be, right? What the background is exactly thinking about those two notions. What on one hand university is supposed to be, and what is its role in this unprecedented time of climate emergency and of changes that we're bound to have and to see and to kind of create, right? It's an acknowledgement of a global emergency, the planetary well-being framework, basically. And Jose Luis is going to tell much more about that. Trying to bring in transformative actions, so concrete actions, not just plans, strategies, actions as to how we can help. The UPF, Pompeu Fabra University, responded to this emergency, basically, in various fields of university activity as regards research, as regards teaching, but also organization itself. And we tackled all aspects of all notions of science and all parts of science that we're kind of teaching here. So from health to economics to biology, humanities, politics, engineering, law, communication, nothing was spared in this way of thinking of how to transition. So what planetary well-being actually is, it's a university-wide inter and transdisciplinary project trying to figure out a way of how the university of tomorrow should actually be. Now, before I give you the definition that we figured out in the last few years, what do you think planetary well-being actually is? And it can be anything in the world. The first thing that comes to your mind, what it actually means.
Those of you who just arrived, we are on a Mentimeter session. If you want to go to menti.com, you have the code up there and you can join the rest for the questions. Coherence is funny because as we will say later, of course, planetary well-being is related to the Sustainable Development Goals. Mm-hmm. And many people criticize the SDGs because there's no coherence in them. Mm-hmm. It's an overlap. We will come back to this.
For sure. Balance, equality, this is strong.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay, perfect. We ended up coming to the same place, basically, more or less, as to what at the end of the day planetary well-being means to us too. Unfortunately, I also oftentimes use it as a synonym, the sustainability as a synonym to planetary well-being, which is not exactly the case. There are nuances between the two, but what I can say is that one of the bases or the foundations of planetary well-being for sure is sustainability, either environmental, either social, either both of them sometimes, economic included. Yes, it's true. I love the word collaboration and connectedness in a way. That's something that's missing in today's science, but the way of living too. The systems are so disconnected that that's why we have the externalities we're having, right? But on the other hand, how did we figure out how to define planetary well-being? And God, this was not a one-time exercise. We simply want to define it as the highest attainable standard of well-being for human and non-human beings and their social, but of course also natural systems. So that's how we define it in the concept paper after a lot of struggle, and I believe we did it well. So now I am very kindly inviting Jose Luis to explain how the concept came about, what it aims to do, and what it's doing. So I'll just change the seats.
Or maybe you can, that doesn't get here. No.
No, that's fine. No worries. No worries. What I need to do though is to change here. Give me 1 second. Because we will need to share your presentation, right?
Yeah.
Do you have it open already?
No, it's in the desk.
Then you will share it, yeah?
Yeah. That is theirs.
Here. Okay. Just here. And now you can share.
Here. Yeah. So, okay. this is a long presentation, and I will don't go through all the slides, because as Lela was saying, basically the idea is to have an exchange with you. So what I will start doing now is explaining you how this started, what triggered all this discussion, and then we will come back to your answers in the Mentimeter to have this debate, this discussion about what to do, what should we do next, what the universities in the EUTOPIA Alliance should draw from all this, and what could be a good agenda for all of us, having this kind of ideal in mind. So let me just mention very, very briefly two examples that I think we can all have in mind when we speak about planetary well-being, right? The well-being of the planet and the human beings and non-human beings that live in it. If we think in global challenges or global existential threats that are threatening now our life in this planet and our well-being, I think that there are two clear examples, and I don't need to spend much time explaining them. Nowadays are two clear examples that show all the complexities and all the features of the kind of challenges that I think planetary well-being is supposed to address. And the first one is, of course, the pandemic. The first one used to be, before the pandemic, used to be the climate crisis, because we started 4 years ago before the pandemic came out. But now the pandemic, of course, is another example, very clear example of what we have. What we can see in the pandemic, we can use them just as examples. I mean, there are many, many challenges that are out there and that we should want to approach, and that we should, or we might think that universities have some responsibility to tackle. But again, just using them as examples that are clear and that everyone knows, what we can see in the pandemic is that, of course, the pandemic is transforming our societies. It's not over yet, as we know. It's transforming our societies probably more than we know, or more than we noticed. At the beginning, there was if you remember, there was a lot of rhetoric about how everything will change. Now, what we see is that many people were actually just wishing to come back to the past and how things were before the pandemic. But even if we don't notice, it's clear that they will have effects on health, on the economy. Of course, we can all see it, on labor, on social and cultural relations, on legal and political institutions, and so on and so forth. And another interesting aspect of this example, and I think that this is also shared by the climate crisis example and by many others, is that it's global. It's a global challenge, but in a twofold way, in two senses. So first, it's global because it affects us all. The pandemic is affecting every human being in the world, at least potentially. So it's, in that sense, it's global, but it's also global in another deeper and more interesting sense, or equally interesting sense, which is that there will be no solution against unless we all cooperate and we coordinate our efforts to try to fight against this pandemic. And we know, we have seen many examples in this 1.5 years, that if the pandemic goes on in one country, even those countries that are doing fantastically, like, I don't know, New Zealand, who is doing great, maybe because they have been more effective in the policies that they have applied, or maybe because for other reasons, but for whatever reason, they are doing much, much better. But they are not safe, and they are not safe because from the moment in which the pandemic is going on in a different country, it can mutate. Even if all your population is fully vaccinated, it doesn't matter. You are not safe unless you get rid of the pandemic everywhere, of the virus everywhere. And that means that the kind of action that it requires is a global action. So it's global in the sense that the impact is global on everyone, but also in the sense that the solution needs to be global. And that is a big challenge, because that means that we need to coordinate our efforts, our reactions, in a way that we haven't done yet, as I think it's clear to everyone. And take the example of vaccines, right? So here you have the latest numbers. This comes from the Johns Hopkins dashboard. And the latest number last night was that 7.4 billion vaccine doses have been administered in the world, 7.4. And we know the pandemic has had an equal impact. Well, you know, the data here is a little bit fuzzy, but Africa, for some reason, has not been so much affected. But what I wanted to mention as an example within this example is Latin America. If we focus in Latin America for a moment, Latin America stands for 8% of the world's population, but it has suffered 27% of the death toll of this pandemic so far. So that means that they have been much more affected, at least in terms of mortality, much more affected than other continents. Now, out of these 7.4 billion vaccine doses that has been administered yesterday, only 750 million have been given in Latin America. And that's much better than how it was 5 months or 4 months ago. But this is still yet only 10% of the vaccines of the world. So there is a clear disparity here in terms of the affectation, but also in terms of how we are doing in the distribution of the solution or part of the solution in terms of the vaccines. So we are failing to coordinate the actions in a way that we are really effective, and we act on the basis of epidemiological and medical criteria only. But we all know, I don't need to spend much time, as I said, we all know that these arguments or these reasons have not prevailed, and basically we have conducted the distribution of vaccines for other reasons. Climate emergency is another of the examples, right? And I think it's clear for everyone that we are doing badly in the CO2 emissions, right? This is how it goes.
Can I just ask you?
Yes, sure.
Okay, can I just ask something to the audience? Who has been taking a look at what was happening at COP26? If you can raise your hands. This is just for my curiosity. Okay, can I just have one comment? What do you think about the outcome? Because exactly that's what's happening. Do you have a comment? We need to? We need to fix it, yeah, okay. We will try to discuss at the end of the Mentimeter session. I just wanted to know if everybody was in line into what is happening, at least following from far.
Yes, interrupt me, and all of you, you can, let's make it a conversation. So you can raise your hand. I think, do we have microphones here? Or
do we have microphones to ask the audience or not?
For those, especially, no?
No? Okay.
Okay,
not a problem.
For those online, okay. But feel free to raise your hand and intervene whenever you want.
And please do, okay? That's why we're here.
So we all know, the CO2 emissions, and it's not the only cause of global warming, but it's one of the most important ones. And we know all these graphics, we all know about them. We are not doing well. After 26 conferences, COPs, climate conferences, we have not yet come to a solution to this. In a way, if you try to explain this to a child, I don't know, maybe you have children, I have one of 14 years old. If you try to explain this to a teenager, it's hard to explain, actually, why after 26 conferences where you have all the most powerful, let's imagine, most powerful people in the world, we have not come with a solution, right? Because again, the climate crisis, as it happens with the pandemic, it's another twofold global problem in the sense that its effects will affect us all in one degree or another, but also the solution, not only the solution for stopping global warming, but also the solution in terms of how to deal with the consequences that will happen anyway, inevitably. This requires coordinated action as well. And in that respect, we are again failing, as we are doing, I think, regarding the pandemic, despite the fact that the pandemic also has positive sides in the global warming as well, the climate crisis as well, because we have done some progress. And in the case of the pandemic, is obvious, right? So the scientific progress that the vaccines imply, I think we all can agree that it's actually wonderful, right? And to have had these vaccines, all these 7.4 billion doses administered in less than 1 year, it's actually a miracle. So science has gone quite well in some respects. But something is failing since we are not coming with a solution that comes out from the coordinated efforts from states. Okay, let me skip some things. But again, the vulnerability that climate change poses for the world, if we look at it from the bigger picture, is not the same for everyone. And there are some countries that are more vulnerable than others. And it's interesting to see if you, I don't have the slide here, but if you compare this slide with a slide that measures income or wealth in countries, it's almost one-on-one, right? So those countries that are poorer or developing, or they are doing worse in terms of income and wealth, they are also those that are more vulnerable. And not only because they are poor, but also because from the climate point of view, they are more exposed to the effects of this. So this is a concern that we should all have about how to do. Okay, let me skip just this part of the PowerPoint and go to the.
This was a crash course in the development of everything from the side of the social sciences, natural sciences. You saw it all.
Right. So, and let me begin to focus with planetary well-being. So, as I said before, the way we thought about planetary well-being was always connected with the Sustainable Development Goals. So, the Sustainable Development Goals, what they are great in many respects. And I guess from my view, if they are great for something, or the most important value they bring is that they provide a common framework. So we can, all institutions in the world, not only universities, but of course, all universities in the world, plus all governments, plus corporations, citizens, NGOs, everyone can refer to the same framework. And yes, we can disagree about how to understand each of these goals or what each of them requires. There's a lot of disagreement, but it's the same framework. That helps a lot because we can sustain the same conversation. So we never thought that planetary well-being should compete with the SDGs, because the SDGs provide this fantastic, let's say, common language that we can all speak. Planetary well-being is just a contribution to it. In a way, it's dependent or it's instrumental to the SDGs. So in a way, the SDGs are wider because, again, they are universal. They are a common language for everyone. And planetary well-being is our way of understanding this, is one way among others. And we would be happy if other people might come and say, no, we don't think planetary well-being should be the aim or the utopia or the ideal. We would like to propose another one. Fine, let's have this conversation. I think this is a conversation about how to interpret this common framework. Our way to interpret it is planetary well-being. So in that sense, planetary well-being is like narrower and the SDGs are wider. On the other hand, it is exactly the opposite. The SDGs, as you know, they mark an agenda for 2030, right? And they substitute, they replace the Millennium Development Goals, which set an agenda for 2015. So after 2030, which is only 9 years from now, we are already very close. In 2030, we will have to have another framework. Of course, very similar to this, I guess, because we will not change our main concerns, but we will need another framework. In that sense, planetary.
Well, hopefully we do. Yes, into 9 years, I hope that some of those are so well that we don't have to. Yeah, I know.
You're more optimistic than me.
I know.
But that's so. In that sense, planetary well-being is a longer project, is a longer horizon. It's wider in that sense. It's paradoxical because in one sense it's narrower, in the other it's wider. Because planetary well-being is something that can be perfectly still applicable and relevant after beyond 2030. So in a way, it's an ideal that goes beyond that agenda. And, you know, so what, of course, as in many other cases, I think that when you, if you are in your universities concerned about these things, I guess that you probably have been having the kind of conversations we have had about how worried we are with many things that are affecting our planet. I gave two examples, but the pandemic and the climate crisis, but these are only two, as I said, and there are many others. And for many people, so regarding climate, we are in a really critical situation now, arriving to some tipping points that they might have no way back. And they are like really, really crucial moments in which we need desperately some kind of urgent action. This regarding climate, but also you might have a bigger picture. And here I recommend this book by this philosopher, Toby Ord from University of Oxford, called The Precipice. You can imagine it's not very rosy picture of what the world is right now, but so he comes with these estimations. I don't know how accurate they are. He took each of the estimations from the relevant experts in each of the disciplines. And here what he does is he divides the risks that he sees in the world, in the planet right now. He divides them in two kinds: natural risks on the one hand and anthropogenic risks on the other. And on natural risks, of course, you have different things. You have the existential catastrophe provoked by an asteroid or a comet impact or a supervolcanic eruption. I think it's not the case of La Palma, or a stellar explosion, something like that. The overall total natural risk, existential risk of having something that endangers the existence of the humankind is 1 in 10,000, which is, you might think it's not that much. We should not, I mean, we can sleep overnight with that risk. Of course, the problem comes more clearly with the anthropogenic risks, and there's a bunch of them: nuclear wars, climate change. Of course, it's one of the most important ones. But remember, here we're not talking about some effects of climate change, because this is not a risk. This is something that we already see in the present. It's a current thing, an actual thing. Here he's taking climate change as an existential threat, as if climate change might actually end up with the history of humankind. And this risk, the experts estimated in 1 in 1,000. But there are others, right? And engineered pandemics is one of them, with 1 in 30, which is quite a lot, much more likely, by the way, than naturally arising pandemics. And all this comes from before the pandemic. And so the overall anthropogenic risk is 1 in 6, which is much more, of course, which means that the total existential risk, forget now about this distinction, is 1 in 6, because when you add 1 in 6 to 1 in 10,000, then the total risk is 1 in 6, which is actually a Russian roulette, right? So 1 in 6 is quite a lot. Of course, this is presupposing that we don't do anything, because the 1 in 6 risk comes from the anthropogenic risk. And this is something that, because the origin is anthropogenic, that means that we might do certain things to try to reduce this risk. It's in our hands. We can do nothing or very little to avoid an asteroid impact, but we can do many things to avoid the other stuff. So in a way, the precipice, this book, in a way, you might think it's catastrophist. It's not actually. So what it is it takes all the knowledge we have about all these risks, and it's a quest, a desperate quest actually for do something. It's a quest for action, convinced under the conviction that we can actually do many things that might help to reduce these risks. Okay, all this was the background under which we started thinking, reflecting about these problems. And then in 2000, let me just very quickly give you a little bit of the history of this initiative. So everything started in 2017, and the former president of the university, Jaume Casals, then he announced that the university had the intention to promote an interdisciplinary initiative in the field of planetary well-being. Everything was announced and inaugurated in 2017. Now I will explain where the concept came from, but basically the vision that he had was that the university was in need of something that was strategic, transformative, that it could give us some kind of a clear aim or objective to transform all our activities: research, teaching, dissemination, etc. Basically to tackle all these major challenges. So out of the concern, the deep concern that we had and he had with all these issues, we thought that the university had to do something and had to do their part, our part on this. So we designed like a roadmap, which was basically, then later we can go to the details. Now I will not do it, but we designed a roadmap that had to work in all the different spheres of activity in which the university has some action. Research, of course, and teaching, the educational strategy, also in translation and innovation, dissemination, etc. But it was also meant from the beginning as an initiative that had to transform the institution itself. And that was the institutional strategy. So we divided the initiative, the roadmap, in these two big things. So I will come back to the details later if we have time, and there are other sessions in this week to come back to this. This also, let me just mention briefly this. This is also part of a larger project. Maybe you can see here in the map. We are in, just close, we are in the building next to this red square here. And as
basically the parking is right behind us.
Yes, the parking is this, the parking is...
The red thing is actually the parking that you're looking at here out the window. It's not going to be a parking
the cars. In March, there will be no parking, and we will start building a new hub of science and research with different partners, and different institutions will come here. One of the buildings, there will be 3 buildings, as you can see here. One of the buildings here will be entirely devoted to doing research on planetary well-being. It will be interdisciplinary, it will be impact-oriented, it will be, of course, focused to all the challenges and the main concerns that we have, etc. And now let me say, and to come to an end from this introductory part, and then we can come back to anything you want. But let me tell you a little bit more about why we chose this notion of this stack of planetary well-being. The inspiration came from a paper that was published in The Lancet in 2015. So it's 6 years ago, it's not that long. This is the title of the paper, Safeguarding Human Health in the Anthropogenic Epoch. And well, you know, The Lancet is a medical journal. Basically, this came from the medical sector, from health, research in health. And basically from people who had been specializing in global health, right? So these were the ones who triggered this kind of concern. So what they claim in the paper is that paradoxically, if you analyze all the indicators about how the humankind has been doing in the 21st century, most of them are super positive. If you look at the well-being of humans, if you look at the health of humans, if you look at violence, the indicators of violence have declined. If you look at the number of years that people live before the pandemic, this is 2015. If you look at the main indicators of human well-being, in most of them, we are doing much, much better, right? So it's a history of success, actually, right? Especially in the last couple of centuries. At the same time, they had the firm conviction that we are ruining, cracking the planet in which we live, right? We are spoiling the natural resources, we are exhausting them, we are endangering the sustainability of the planet with the climate crisis and so on. And it's impossible not to, suspect that part of our success in the well-being of people is due to the exploitation we have done on these natural resources. The terrible conclusion is that no matter how successful you might be in your medical efforts, in providing cures for people and helping them to live longer and so on, no matter what you do there and how successful you are, if you ruin the planet, in the end, of course, this is going to end with all of us, right? That's the end of the humankind. So it's a very obvious, if you want a simple idea, and we might wonder why they didn't figure out before, but in a way, it's a simple, very simple idea. The health of human beings is not independent, but is interdependent, is interconnected with the health of the planet. There's no way of separating both things. If we want to care about the health of human beings, and here we might add, I guess, also the discussion about non-human beings, right? Animals or vegetables and so on. If we want to care about their health, we need to care about the health of the planet because they are interconnected.
And just before you continue here, I really want to do some distinction that I think I started brainwashing even my daughter now with it. Like, you know how many times we're taught in the framework of sustainability, we need to save the planet. Hands up, who has heard that in the last 5 years? We need to save the planet. Okay, guys, please, no. Also planetary well-being, we're not saving the planet. The planet is rather okay. It's being a little bit sick by us, but if it needs to get rid of us, it will. Who's in trouble is us, the humanity. Planet is okay, okay? Planet will just figure out how to get rid of its bug, and its bug is the humanity. So we need to switch the narrative too, honestly, and this is one of our attempts of switching the narrative of understanding the interdependence and that the dependence is on our side, on the side of the humanity and not on the side of the planet. Just that.
That's right. And then, so what they did in this paper, this was not only a paper, this was an initiative, a joint initiative of the Lancet, the Rockefeller Foundation, Harvard University, and they created a Planetary Health Alliance under the conviction that the health of the planet is interdependent with the health of human beings. They created a new journal, which is called the Lancet Planetary Health. So it's a huge initiative actually to promote this agenda. But all what we did was inherit this. We like to think on planetary health as the older sister idea, and we are the younger sister here. But we, in a way, what we want is we want to expand the ambition. We want to focus not only on health, even if their notion of health is quite wide, to be honest, but we want to expand the notion of health and be concerned with well-being, as Lela showed in the
But that's also
definition.
something I wanted to say when you started with Lancet. I'm like, this is something that's dear to my heart. This is the true notion of interdisciplinarity, you know? So this social science guys come and we try to use it as a framework for the whole university, but the basic notion was from health sciences. So it's from medicine that has seemingly nothing to do with the transformation of the institution. And that's the systems thinking that I really much welcome. And that's, thank God, coming more and more towards us, but it's new, right? So who before was reading kind of medical magazines and then implementing it in social sciences? That was not seen before. So I'm very much welcoming those initiatives that kind of join ideas together for a better tomorrow. Yes, sir.
Right. Here you can see how they define planetary health, and you will see that our definition is almost copied right from theirs. So it's actually inspired, as I said. We want to see it as a derivation of it. Actually, they included the notion of well-being in their definition. They had health, well-being, and equity, right? And we have integrated it all under the notion of well-being. So we also draw 4 things from this initiative, and now I will end up looking again to our definition, and we open the debate. So they had these 4 messages that I think they are also they should be rescued or kept in under our initiative. The first one is that human health, or we might say well-being, and civilization depend on natural systems. This, I think, it's a matter of fact, and I think that's pretty obvious. Message 2, that threats, it's true that are hard to predict and ascertain, right? I mean, all what you have seen before, it's just estimations, and it's very difficult actually to, I mean, everyone knew, all the epidemiologists knew that we were going to have a pandemic at some point, but they didn't know which kind of pandemic and when. And this is what characterizes our world. We live in a world of uncertainty, as we have always
And sorry, that is something that I see that it's very difficult in a way to insert in curricula. And this is something I want to speak to you also about. We're so used to our theories being firm and everything being so secure and being so, in terms of, I don't know, like kind of a routine of how things are developing and technology is following, that the whole university has this notion and this feeling of certainty and boxes and frameworks and numbers. And then the crisis comes now, not just the pandemics, but in general, the climate crisis, which smacks all of that out of the way. And we're forced to work in a framework of uncertainty, and academia is not doing really well in working inside the uncertainty. So that is a strategic transition that kind of needs to happen. And it goes beyond the academic framework. It goes basically to the notion of how we deal with science, what science is supposed to be, because by far right now, it's not exact. And we want it to be exact. So dealing with that uncertainty of not having exact numbers is a big, big challenge, not only in academia, but also at the policy level. But it's true, it's the certainty is kind of bringing us a little bit outside of our comfort zone, to say.
And that's absolutely right. And I think, I mean, all of you might come from different disciplines. I'm lawyer and political scientist by training, and I'm also philosopher by doing, as we all do, we all are in a way. But so what I've been teaching, I mean, there's been, if you're familiar with these fields, many people, even if they have criticized those who explicitly claimed this, many people have operated under the assumption that we are in a way living some kind of the end of the history. The end of the history in the sense, I mean, they refer to the law and democracy in the sense that, okay, we have achieved all what we were supposed to have. That's the maximum level of democracy and law and human rights that we might have. maybe we can make slight little improvements, but that's the only way. It's that there is the only one way of organizing things. This is the correct one, and that's it. That's the end, right? We have been teaching this as if this was the response, and then all of a sudden we face a world that is characterized by uncertainty, but also emergency. And we see all our governments making many things under this emergency excuse, or not only an excuse, with good reason, making things that were hard to believe just a couple of years ago. Message 3, the improvement of governance and knowledge is needed. In a way, if you take the example of the COPs of the climate crisis, science has delivered quite well, as I said. Yes. We now know quite well what are the causes of climate change. We know how to stop it, more or less. We don't know that much which will be the effect. We can predict some things, but we don't know that much about this. But we know how to stop it, which is the most critical part here. And what we all see is that, I don't know what's your opinion, and again, we will open the debate now, but I think that many people will agree that the COPs, all the COPs, including the COP26, have been a failure, right? Mm-hmm. They have not delivered what they were supposed to do. These conferences are conferences among state governments. State governments are the ones, the main actors in the international system. They are the ones that should coordinate and come with agreements. And we see that they are, for some reason, they are unable to do it. So governance and knowledge needs to be more integrated, and we know that. But the fourth message is also a quest for optimism here. Mm-hmm. Solutions are available. It's not that there are no solutions. We should not be hopeless. It's not just a way of saying, okay, this is terrible, let's just forget about everything and get some fun in our last days. It's not about that. Solutions are available. Nothing is impossible, and that's why it's our responsibility to do something. So when we came to this definition that Lela presented before, we know that in a way we violate one rule. I'm a philosopher, as I said. We violate the rule of not using one word in the definition that is in the expression that you're supposed to define. That's the word of well-being. And the reason is because well-being is a very tricky concept. So we also want to ask you now in this discussion, what you think about what should we understand by the well-being of people and the well-being of the planet. I think this is one of the things that we would be very happy if you could help us. Maybe I stop here. Okay.
I will torture you with some questions more, but firstly, I just want to give you an overview. Our colleague, Esther Oliveras, wanted to present what kind of was born out of the initiative. So the actual actions beyond this debate, which is still ongoing, and it's very difficult as to what we're trying to achieve. And we're trying to be as flexible as possible, which we're usually not in universities, right? To kind of skew the whole system of trying to achieve the exact goals that we set, but it doesn't always work out the way we want to. But Esther was preparing a really good presentation. Unfortunately, she fell ill, and I'll just scoop through it to kind of give you a feeling, a touch of what we're actually doing. So it's not just we're sitting and we're debating and our university functions like it did before and there's no tomorrow, but what we actually do. So please bear with me once I prepare the presentation and I will continue. Sorry for this. Okay, so the work done here is completely by Esther Oliveras and me, Lela Melon. I'm just going to present it, okay? So I don't take the credits for actually doing the work. So after all of the debates and the definitions and trying to get out the concept paper and trying to cooperate with the other universities and trying to create our dissemination events, we said, okay, fine, we need to have a plan. Right. So the situation is uncertain. There are a lot of changes. There's a lot of emergency, but we need to know where we're walking inside of that emergency. Right. So what we have is we kind of organize ourselves and our aims and goals into so-called action plans. OK, we said you can't put them all under the same umbrella because, first of all, university, specifically UPF, it's a large institution and it has different functions and it can't just be a sustainability plan and you're done. We do have the first environmental sustainability plan focused on the environment. And then on all the levels that you might imagine, meaning organization, research, transfer, teaching, etc. Okay, what are we doing in those lines? Then we have an equality plan that goes beyond the environmental sustainability, speaking about social sustainability, right? We also have teaching and research in there trying to tackle the diversity in general, and then the gender aspect, etc. Understanding that that is a very similar notion to sustainability in general, but it's its social part, and it has different implications, okay? And then the first diversity and inclusion plan that talks about diversity in general and tries to be aligned with the rest too. What's important here is that I want to note that you all notice that we understand that those are different fields, but they go under the same umbrella of planetary well-being, so they need to be coherent. So what we're working hard on is that those plans are coherent. And you know, if you're working in the field of sustainability or in general in higher education, that coherence is a rocky road. Okay, but what we're aiming at is to develop sturdy plans that don't collide with one another, but that they accompany each other into having stronger outcomes. And that's a job that's very difficult to do. But since we started doing it, we're making sure that the coherence is there. Okay, that is something that I wanted to mention. We declared climate emergency, but what I want to note here is that we didn't go and declare climate emergency and then we went back into our room and say we're not doing anything because we don't know what to do. So we said, we acknowledge the emergency, we acknowledge the urgency. We understand that there's a role for universities to play. So let's try to figure out on our different levels as to what we're going to do. What did we do in the first level? We figured out our carbon footprint. We have a great UNESCO chair on climate change and life cycle that is based at ESCI-UPF, and their team calculated our carbon footprint for scope 1 and 2, and we're also aware of our scope 3. Who is familiar with terms of scope 3 emissions, scope 2 emissions, scope 1 emissions? Okay. To be completely honest, the scope 1 are the direct. So those are basically the ones that are related to your basic functioning, those lights, those chairs, this electricity, etc., what we're doing inside the university. The second one is all the providers that are coming towards us. So all of the suppliers in terms of company, but the university is also a company, so it's going to touch upon that too. And the third one is the most difficult to tackle, but why it's important to tackle it is because it's the biggest. Those are the indirect emissions. How much emissions are we creating because we're making students coming here? How much emissions we created because we're hosting the Utopia week? I don't want to know. Those are the scope 3 emissions. So it's good to be aware of them, but it's very difficult to tackle them. It's not impossible, it's just very difficult. So the pandemics gave us kind of a framework where we can start thinking about how to tackle them because it brought in hybrid learning, right? So we're teaching online, we're teaching in person, etc., and we're heavily influencing our scope 3 emissions by that. So that gives us new ideas as to how to help, right? Because this displacement and movement towards the university, it's basically the ones who are creating the most of emissions. We know that by knowing our carbon footprint, we're not done. We need to get it down, and we need to get it down seriously and fastly. So Esther created a graph of saying, look, okay, fine. We were growing immensely, like the whole world, from the inception of the beginning of the university, well, okay, 5 years later, but until right now, or right until 2018, what we're aiming to do and we need to do in line with European policies is reaching net zero, okay, by 2035, because that's kind of, well, the EU number, who knows, when are we supposed to be net zero in the EU framework as the policies on the EU level? We are doing bad in universities. It's 230 now. It used to be 250 and it's 230. The climate neutrality, right? The 55%, sorry, is by 230 and the climate neutrality completely is by 250. The initial number was 255 reduction by, I think, 40 something. The initial number before the EU Green Deal came out. So we're trying to join the race. Understanding that scope 3 is the biggest means that, yes, the initial reduction can be done through scope 1 and scope 2, which is manageable, more or less, but the final steps are scope 3, and that's a challenge, and we're aware of that challenge. We're not claiming that we have the solution, but we know what's happening. So what Esther wanted to say here is, okay, fine, the carbon footprint grew, but we kind of became more energy efficient in time. If taking a look at per student, and emissions per student, because the fact is that the university grew also, right? Its student body, etc., and its activity in the last 20 years, which is normal. So what we're doing in the environmental sustainability plan is we divide it by the so-called sustainability hotspots. We're aware of what is out there in science. We're aware of that the university is also an organization. So we're trying to follow that path of understanding what already is. We're tackling from climate change, energy, water usage, which is of course the most challenging one in general, to sustainable infrastructures, mobility itself, the scope 3. Remember? And also the way we're dealing with our mobility inside the university, right? You need to have policies in place that are sometimes non-existent, specifically regarding environmental sustainability. And then dealing with suppliers, right? But communicating and working on sensibilization, not just inside the university, but also towards outside the society or your suppliers, okay? Communication inside, communication outside as to what is to be done and where the knowledge is. And creating partnerships. Not the least important, right? So we would be very, very happy if the Utopia members would jump on the board with us too, into trying to figure out how to carry out this transformation. Okay. Not only in terms of organization, also in terms of teaching, we know we need to change. Okay, so instead of just focusing on what usually happens, not just in university, but also in the companies where you just attach a new department or you attach a new function to the already existing system. What do I mean by that? You create a sustainability department while the rest of the company still works like it did before. The same thing in university. You leave the traditional theory aside and you say, okay, microeconomics is what it is. We're just going to create a environmental economics course next to it, and that's that. We're trying to avoid that. That doesn't work. That is just putting adjacent activities that is a little bit informing about what should be, but you're not changing the knowledge by that. So we have a program, we have a project, sorry, that was working on inserting SDGs or speaking about SDGs in every single class. Our first step was basically search through the offer of the courses that we have by subject title, by keywords. That didn't end up well. So you understand that the university has a lot of faculties, the faculty has a lot of programs, all of those programs have courses, and trying to figure out where we're teaching on SDGs without speaking personally to a professor, which are in thousands, then you need to have a system to search. The keywords gave us a lot of false positive, a lot of false negatives. We were doing that in the framework of my project of sustainable company, and it didn't work because you were really just nitpicking and you didn't have the kind of atmosphere or the nature of the courses. The second step was examining the syllabuses of each subject. An enormous task that is super time consuming. There are judgments and assumptions that need to be made which carry heavy bias. It's impossible not to have bias once you're reading a syllabus and you need to make a qualitative decision as to what sustainability is inside there, or if it is related to planetary well-being or not. It does give coherent perspective on the other side. But here is something that Esther didn't note, and I know she agrees with me. Syllabuses also change. They do change. And once you've done your initial search of 7,000 hours, you're back at square one. So that was kind of not the easiest way to go. The third and last attempt was, okay, fine. So now it's the teacher's responsibility, the professor's responsibility to specify the SDGs he's dealing with in his class. Okay. We are aware of the bias that brings, but at least having a focus as to in the sphere and sense and spirit of which SDG we're supposed to read that syllabus and read that course allows us to maybe have a fourth attempt of gathering the biased and very qualitative judgments on the course in the light of what the professor says he's trying to do in terms of SDGs. Okay, so that was kind of our last attempt into determining where we're teaching well and where we're not teaching well. The very good thing that is also related to that initial part when I said this is a project that's dealing with implementing SDGs inside the curricula is joining the new methods of learning and teaching with the SDGs. So problem-based learning, hands up, who is familiar with it? It is extremely useful because the students already come with a specific pool of knowledge and they cooperate with the professor to create new knowledge. Okay, so it's this interaction, this activity of student that makes it, they learn faster in general. Bringing sustainability in helps from another point of view in creating a class that deals with problem-based learning and teaches SDGs. You experience them. You need to think about them in an informed manner. You're not giving ex cathedra knowledge in theoretical framework and then deal with it. You need to understand when the challenges lie. So that is something that we really welcomed. And the project is actually in the second phase now of implementing the SDGs through problem-based learning. Here she gave examples, and by coincidence, one of the classes is actually mine that we did last year. So I'm a law professor otherwise, okay, law and economics. Yeah, very untypical. We were dealing with tort law, which is a very stringent framework of civil law, dealing exactly with damages and trying to figure out what happens if with product liability. It's an old standing field, not much changes have been happening. And what we did is ambitiously insert SDGs and try to teach about the new developments in the field, connected them with planned obsolescence. Who knows what planned obsolescence is? Hands up. Otherwise, I give you a crash course. Okay, I don't have enough hands up. Planned obsolescence means that this phone could survive easily 10 to 15 years with changing spare parts and updating software, but it is actually very functional only 3 years because they make sure that after 2 years, your battery is going to start running down. You can't change it because it's inseparable from the phone. So you're going to change your phone. Planned obsolescence. So inside the tort law and the damages, we started speaking about that. Could that be the basis for damages? Doing cases, working with studies. It worked wonderful. It was difficult to mount because it's very interdisciplinary, it's very interactive. It is very also a moving field. So us as teachers, we needed to follow if there are new cases that we don't teach crazy things to students. But it worked, and students got a lot of interest in it, and many of them actually went and did their final work on that, which is great, right? So that's kind of that knowledge transfer and that interest you're trying to spur. We have an equality plan that is divided in 5 big areas. And regarding the equality, we are focused on, equity, access, okay? Understanding that equality is a self-standing thing, and we really wish to put it as a pillar of planetary well-being. We understand we have a climate crisis, but we have a crisis in society and inequality too. And we're trying to address it. And it goes not only to the equality of access in general, but it also goes into the insertion of the gender equality inside the teaching curricula. So we went as far as to take a look at which authors the professors are actually advising and the gender of those authors. And there's a, as you might imagine, severe bias. It is not a bias just because universities would create it. It is a bias that also comes from the society, from the inequality that there is in society in terms of roles, in terms of advancing in your career, in terms of then the academic system, etc. But we're aware of it. So we're trying to work on it, and we're trying at least to put attention on it, because that's the first step. If you're not attentive to it, you continue the practices that there are. If you start being attentive to it, you start changing, okay? What else? We inserted also a minor in gender studies. There's a session at 2 today where we're gonna speak about how we changed our curriculum and how we're teaching planetary well-being in specific courses and programs. So join us. I think it's in this room too, no? Yes. If I'm not mistaken, it's in this room, so we can meet at 2. Okay, the reporting is the last thing, but it's important. Why? Because we're verifying what we did, okay? Without external verification, we might tell you all the stories in the world with very beautiful narrative, but there's no change. So there's a lot of debate of how to change, how to follow up. There are the global reporting initiative frameworks, etc., and other initiatives that kind of provide this validity from outside. But this debate is far from being over. We don't understand how to assure that what we achieved actually can be verifiable by outside and avoid greenwashing. We're the 29th in the world. We're using rankings to kind of make stronger this verifiability of what we're doing. So that we were the 29th in terms of the ranking as relates to the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. We're 53rd in the world related to impact on those goals, okay? Those are just numbers and they're rankings, but they allow us to at least understand where we can do better, because the feedback is there as to where the better lies. That is all that basically Esther prepared. Now, maybe I would open, before I start torturing you with Mentimeter once again, just the floor for questions or thoughts and whatever comes to your mind related to what we were doing and related to maybe what you are doing at your university.
Hi, my name is Nada from University of Gothenburg, and I'm from Indonesia as well. So I have the thoughts about the climate change thingy. My thought is actually in EU, basically in Sweden, it's not urgent, but in my country, it's very, very urgent. So I have like a little bit an anger, like if you talk about the airplane and stuff, it's it's not the primary, because in our country, many are uneducated, and we have like 13,000 islands all around. And most of the islands are wasted by the human being because they throw garbage every single day.
Sure.
And no researchers comes there and teach or collaborating. So I think if, and in my country is the green, and I kind of surprised that it's not extreme on the
Yes.
report, because it is extreme. And we are the only one who has orangutan, and orangutan is also dying.
Yeah.
And no one talks about it.
Yep.
You know, we miss out. So I think if the UN has the SDGs, blah, blah, blah thing, they should see which one that's really, really urgent.
It's the topic. Thank you for your comment, Nana. It's the topic of common but diversified responsibilities, right? That is very, very urgent and pertinent. And what you're speaking about is the Western bias. This is nothing new. I'm sorry to say there's nothing new, and I wish it wouldn't be like that. But also the feeling at COP was countries that are already heavily impacted and that are about to be so badly bruised by climate change, they had their say, but they were not heard. I didn't have a feeling that they were heard. When there were discussions on the floor inside the main hall, and it was really governments discussing, there were a lot of strong words that are very untypical for politics said this year. The responses were very vague. What you're talking about is diversity, inclusion, understanding the common but diversified responsibilities, and looking away is happening. The issue is, well, the comment was to answer, because this is not my answer to you, because I don't have an answer. I don't know how to resolve this. But one of the comments specifically at COP was also, watch when one of the big cities in the West, like New York, or some other coastal city, including Barcelona, but we're small, gets hit for real because of something that's done with climate change, then we will maybe start speaking. Because it kind of always is like that. It is very remote. It is very ununderstood. But let's not just, for instance, attack politics. What is happening also is with us as humans. You think you understand, but you're not living it. I'm living very comfortably here in the middle of Barcelona discussing notions with you because I'm privileged as hell. And due to that privilege of mine, I'm biased. And I think I understand and I'm in the field, but I know deep down that I have no idea what I'm talking about. I'm just fighting for a cause in which I believe. But to be able to understand it, I would have to go with you and sit down and live it and drag my loved ones through it so that I would see how bad it actually is. So that's the problem, the discrepancy between the reality and...
I fully agree. And of course, I appreciate your comment. And let me give you, so you mentioned the case of climate emergency and the loss of biodiversity, and in the specific case of the orangutan. But you know that most species, actually, most of the mammals, the big mammals, are actually endangered. And it's not only orangutans, but there are many others. But let me give you this example with the pandemic as well. So I guess that all of you come from different countries. And what we have, maybe it's different in other countries. I haven't been in all of them, and I don't know if what I'm going to say is right for all the countries, but I can tell you about Spain or Argentina or the United States and other countries that I know and I've been following. So when you look at the news, what they were constantly giving as an information for the population was the numbers of infections and deaths in their country all the time. So it's obviously a global problem. We know that. But despite this, we are stubbornly giving information about our narrow world, right? The state in which we live, which gives, I think, partly a wrong impression. It's actually not, it's not only biased, as you were saying, but it's also mistaken. It's a mistake because it might give you the impression that if your country is doing well, but give you the impression that you are not suffering from that problem. And that's not true. It's obviously not true. And we should, even if we are not solidarity and we are not caring at the same level of all the people in the world, even if you know, some people make this argument that we should care more about our fellow nationals than we should care about other people in the world. Even if you buy this argument, you have self-interested reasons actually to be worried about what happens in other countries, because actually the virus might again mutate and come back to you.
That is something that I wanted to note. Like, I really loved it that you started the presentation with the COVID example, because that was Mother Nature's way of saying, hey guys, this is a crash course, because this is what's coming, just in a different way. Like, can you please gather together and do a collective action? Because otherwise there's no B plan for you. Like, again, nature is fine. There's no B plan for you. And we failed so miserably and it's really just an expression of what climate change is going to be, and how the consideration and understanding that, like you said, the division between us and them and ours and theirs. We didn't manage to understand with COVID that there's no ours and theirs. There's just ours and global and interconnected. And we keep on failing with this interconnectedness, I think. There's still this division in us into understanding it's there, it's not there, it's coming very fast towards you. There means it's here for you. It just depends on the time horizon and the geographical horizon. And it was a crash course, the COVID, and we didn't understand it. Okay, can I just ask you now, before we take another question, can you just engage in this question just for my curiosity? Which elements are the most relevant in the sustainable transition of higher educations? And please note, the ones who marked other, you're going to have a chance of putting your words right after this slide to explain to me which ones you meant, because I really wanted to hear from you. So you go to www.menti.com and you use the code that's up there, okay? Just to help me a little bit. And if your answer is other, you will fill in the words in the next slide, okay? Let me give you a minute or two.
You have other comments? Other comments? Let's open the discussion, yeah.
I just wanted to add up on my friend, if I could say that. I come from Serbia. So what is happening there is that we can see the impact of the global north. So we see that we're kind of becoming the country that is that has like lots of people that are working for small wages, and you have lots of rivers that are being bought by big companies. So what I suggest, maybe because this university is really big, so maybe we could focus on trying to organize the global north, because South is suffering, and you have problem with vaccines and with COVID, and that's because they're not wealthy and they don't have health insurance, but also like they work for really small wages, so we can't even get to them, like what's the problem about this virus and how to help it like improve the health or whatever, because they're kind of in a state where they don't care about the family planet, you know. So maybe we could try to focus on organizing this global north and try to explain how really it is hard for a small country to be, I mean, used for production and used as a kind of a country of a waste and pollution. You know, everything is gathered in those countries where you don't have enough money, and they would do anything for you, you know. So maybe that's the problem. And we're kind of, I mean, I'm not sure, but most of us are really sure about the problems that we have also in like Latin America, and about Indonesia and also India, Africa, but nobody is talking about global north, you know.
And I think it's a great comment and great suggestion, but do you have, sorry, keep the microphone. Do you have concrete ideas about how we could do it?
Maybe just like, because this is connected to the European Union, right? So maybe as an institution, as a faculty, try to explain to other students that's what you're doing now, but like explain to other students or teachers who could teach on their faculty what's going on and how to make it better, you know. Like well, if I go back to my country, I will be studying here for the PhD, but if I go back to my country, I would try to implement what's going on, because there you can't really do anything except just accepting those big offers for factories or.
So you think that
Yeah.
So you think that the way to go, at least one way to go, would be to intervene in teaching, in the way we teach?
Yes.
You
yes.
think so? That's
yes.
what we should, that should be the priority?
Yes, because I mean, I've been to some classes at the UAB for political ecology. And what I've noticed is that they all of the time they're just spending on talking about how bad things are and just on negative things, and nothing really working on it. And it just, oh, this is bad. They don't have rivers. They don't have money. They don't have homes. You know, okay, yeah, those people who are really poor, they could really organize themselves like Zapatistas, but also like we need to focus on this really big thing, you know, and try to teach about that.
But I would just add here that we really need to be realistic. So yes, of course, it's not good that every country is used for the small countries are used, and the further ones from the developed world are used for basically hiding the negative externalities at the end of the day of the developed world. But we need to be very, very realistic into having a concrete plan in place, meaning that the reason why it's like that is because there's a lot of economic gains from that. So now you need to figure out first, yes, of course, you want to stop those practices that are very unsustainable. But in order to stop them, you need to have a very concise and precise economic argument as to where those economic benefits that used to come from the polluting practices are going to come now. And the first part is of the sustainability speeches we've had the last 10 years. The second part is the realistic picture of saying, being an opportunist and saying, look, this is not just a loss, so it's fine. We need to figure out how to not make it just a loss. Until that switch is made, the system is so, it's pure inertia of the system. It's created and it's not gonna budge, because budging it means making people poorer. And that's something you can do. So you need to have a B plan of saying, yeah, we're gonna stop this, but we have a beautiful idea as to where your economic benefits are going to come from. And that is something that is lacking sometimes right now in suggesting changes, because you're like, you need to change and you will change and people are going to have better environment, but they won't have anything to eat.
Yeah, I know.
And that's a change.
Sorry. Yeah, we don't need to stop it. We just need to implement some changes that would be sustainable for other countries. Right?
Sorry.
Sorry, technical issues. Yeah, of course. But like I'm telling you, it's not just because the system is embedded in this linear production. It's in the way of figuring out how to make economically sustainable the new solutions that we have, right? And sometimes here we can have answers in the framework of circular economy and understanding the new skills and inputs and services are going to be needed, which create value, which is great, right? But it's not solving the whole gap. So circular economy, circular practices, circular skills give us a little bit of leeway saying, look, not everybody is going to be left without the previous job. It's just going to transform. But we have a gap that we can't address right now because the consumption economy is a monster. It's enormous. It gives a lot of jobs. It destroys everything in its path. But
leather industry, right? Like you can make some changes, not stop them, just try to let everyone try to like make it sustainable for other people.
For sure, it's a switch in a mentality too. What I'm trying to say is those are all the steps that need to come together for this to be viable. So the idea is absolutely correct, but viability we're sometimes struggling with. Sorry, you wanted to come?
No. There were other questions. Yes, you were first and then we go.
Okay. Hello, I'm Lisa. I'm from the University of Brussels. But I am Dutch and I also have Suriname roots. So it's kind of like I can see a bit of both of the pictures of the maybe a bit less developed world and the very developed world. But I was actually wondering, it's kind of a bigger question. For example, you stated, it seems obvious, and I think to everyone in this room, that a lot of solutions need to come from the Western global North, let's say, because now you kind of see this discourse of like, maybe if everyone who's not developed yet, all the countries, if they just never develop, then maybe Europe can keep living the way that Europe likes to live, which is on the backs of everybody else in the world. And I think it's clear to everybody here, at least, that that is not an actual viable solution. But I was wondering, and it's kind of a very big question, oftentimes when we speak about sustainability, there are a bunch of people that are already a bit progressed in life, and they search out all the young people in their room and they go, you are going to do it, right? You're our future. You're going to take care of it. All the students, you're fine. Once you're in power in 10 years, then you can say to all the young people in the room that they're going to solve it.
Right.
Great. This means nothing and nothing happens. So I was wondering to you, on the one hand, what is going to change between now and COP27, let's say, that you are going to do and you are going to change in the system, and you know how broad I'm using that term, that will actually get us somewhere? And if you can also manage to answer the second part of the question, do you think that the Sustainable Development Goals are actually able to be achieved altogether? Because, for example, if you say Europe needs to solve sustainability and they need to rein themselves in their consumption, then you cannot have the goal of strong democracy, because all those people that will say that in Europe will be voted out in 2 years. Because you will say to the European people, you need to give up anything for anyone else in the world, and everybody will go, well, you're not ruling anymore. So how do you feel about both the goal of economic growth and democracy and lesser inequalities and sustainability? And how will you bring that all together without just pointing at the young people?
When you mean you mean the university?
The current, like, let's say, ruling generation right now.
Okay.
We got indirectly attacked.
Am I one of the?
Am I the one of the ruling generation? Because I used to see myself like yesterday's student. So if I'm the part of the ruling generation, I'll answer too.
I think you are. You're a professor, right?
Yeah, that still needs to sink in somewhere. Then
I think it's that's a great question again, and I think we should all discuss about this. One of the problems here, I think, I'm just giving my answer to your question, but one of the problems here is that everyone to whom you might direct this question might have the temptation of saying, that I don't have any power, so what could I do? And they are sincere. I mean, I don't think I have any power, so if I tell you this, I would be sincere. But the problem is that everyone says the same, and in a way, you're right that I was using this example yesterday for those of you who were present in the inauguration. You may remember that former President Barack Obama in the COP26, he made this kind of direct message. He addressed this direct message to the youth, and he said, it's on you. I mean, you should change everything because we haven't done it. And of course, you might think, okay, but you were president of the United States for 8 years. You might have done something else, something more. And he probably might say, yes, but I didn't have much power. That's what I guess he would answer to this. So that's a problem, because in a way it's a problem. I mean, it's obviously a problem, but what I want to say as a professor of global politics is that this is not surprising to anybody. This refers to my first point in my presentation. Global problems require global solutions, and global solutions means that we have to coordinate us all. It's not on any of us individually, it's on all of us collectively. Yeah. And then it's very difficult if the question is what the university, for instance, will do, Fabra or any other, will do before the next COP. I'm not very optimistic about the impact that we might have, but we must start somewhere, because the alternative is, okay, let's finish this session, let's go to the beach. Today is not a good day, but let's go to the bar and have some fun, because there's nothing to do. But of course, we don't accept this hopeless solution. So solutions are out there, and it's on us, all of us. I think you're right in pointing out that older generation should not say simply, okay, this is on the youth and we have been unable to do it, so we just do nothing, right? I think you point on the right direction. It's on everyone. We should all have a responsibility, but the young people also have a responsibility. It's not that they can say, we don't have the power. If that's a question, I don't have the power either.
That's where I want to continue then.
So that's why I mentioned Obama. Even Obama, I think that he sincerely would say, I did all what I could, but even the president of the United States doesn't have the power to say, okay, we should do that and that and that, if you mean bold actions or ambitious actions to be taken. And he would be sincere, I think. And because, again, the question is, it's on all of us, not only individually on any of us separately. I don't know if that satisfies your...
Now the optimistic one is going to speak, okay? We're forgetting something very basic here. And you might think it's a discussion on concepts and on philosophy behind it, but we're forgetting something very basic. Yes, we're playing roles, but we're human beings. And you forget your power as a human being. It doesn't mean I'm going to go out on the street and change the world just because I believe sustainability is the way forward and there's no other. Just because I believe that the quality of life is out there, we're just too silly to see it. No, it's not about that. In regards to concrete impact, for instance, of the UPF that's going to have in the next year, I don't have an answer, but I know why. Because on my side, as a professional, I gathered my ideas as to what I should do to really help the transition. And I created a postgraduate course on sustainability transition from scratch. And we're offering it this year. And what we're trying to do is not saying, oh, we're offering a course that's so nice. We're trying to find the loophole, the hole that nobody filled, where people are searching for information and are searching for knowledge of how to carry this out, and they can't have it because of the stringent, very stuck system that sometimes university brings. So we said, you know what? No, this one is going to be impact oriented. It's going to have 4 courses where we're teaching you how to use the information. The information, you can get it online. We're in 21st century. All the info is there. How to gather it and to use it in your transition is a whole new story. That's where you need help. So I started from there and saying, you know what, I am not going to leave university before I have a feeling that I sent out some troops who are doing the work for us. And this troop sending outside is creating a course that teaches them how to use what it is, how to predict what is happening, because they know the direction of the policy, because it's not about teaching them the policy changes. It's about how to make them look at it, put it in practice, and go out with ammunition. And that is something that's happening in 3 months, not in 1 year. And I don't know if that's going to change one company or none or 10 of them, or it's going to have an avalanche of changes bringing there. But I know that I stopped being passive and very theoretical, and I started being active and giving something that I can say at the end of the day, look, if I meet them in 5 years on the street, I might get lucky and they say, oh, we did it. And that's my grain. Then we have grains of all other professors and the community as a whole at the UPF, where at the end of the day, we might take stake and say, wow, we actually did something. And going back to what I said, humanity in us. So that individual impact of this is the way things should be inside the system, then yes. But we're humans, we're not just playing roles. Okay, so that would be my answer.
I think what I would suggest, we have 30 minutes left. What I would suggest is there is a direct question that you might maybe answer. And then instead of having a question and answer dynamic, why not just open the discussion? And some of you raised your hand, and I would like everyone to have the
participate,
chance
please, yes,
to say whatever you want. So we will try to resist the temptation of giving answers, because it's not our role. I just have the conversation. No. So
it's to support the debate.
But this is a direct question.
Yes.
That you might...
So we got a question on Zoom as to how do the teachers at the UPF accept and adapt to include SDGs in their courses? I know why that question was posed, because later on in the session in the afternoon, I will have a brief discussion on academic freedom and etc. That is kind of a very welcome development that is making this transition very difficult. So how do you force basically this change of happening of thinking in terms of SDGs? There are always 2 ways of dealing with it, because you're going to have at least 2 groups of people. one group that is welcoming with open hands the new knowledge and saying, wow, this is really interesting. I never thought about it like this. So the academic curiosity actually helps you because like, oh, this is cool. We can ask this. And I think this would be, is it like that? So that drive that they have as researchers from the beginning helps you get rid of one group because they accept it like that. Then you have another group maybe that I would say that would take it with enthusiasm, but is overworked, which is another characteristic of academia that doesn't help us. Because this is a huge additional amount of work or thinking in terms of SDGs, even if you knew them from before. Let's not start with the fact that in diverse disciplines, people maybe not know them at all. The amount of work of you understanding them, you know, that presupposes before you attach it to your syllabuses, which is usually not one. Huh? So don't get me wrong, there's not professors who have one course. We have a lot. With those, incentives usually work. Creating a course of saying, look, this is a new development, it's kind of a research thing that you're doing, that they start thinking in SDGs. You provide incentives in terms of presenting their works and in terms of also monetary incentives sometimes. We did that with the SDG course and the problem-based learning. So we killed kind of two flies at the same time. And then you have the third one where there's academic inertia and the unwillingness to change. That one is simply the compulsory development of saying, this is what your teaching plan needs to have. So that's the last group, that it's like, we are truly sorry, but there is no, or I can't. This is what teaching plan of the UPF strategically now has for every course. So if you need support, you have it, but there's no not putting it in. So there are three ways of dealing with the three groups. And basically the last one to be persuaded is just this compulsory push. That's why I keep on saying how welcome planetary well-being as an institutional framework was, because it made it very clear that we're all doing this, whether we want it sometimes or not. This is going to happen in diverse lines. And then people sometimes also understand that this SDG insertion was one of the lines. So that would be basically my question of how to tackle it in three different groups, okay?
And we will come back to this in the session that focuses on teaching at 2 p.m. And I forgot to answer one of the things you said, so even contradicting myself, let me just say it before we really give the word to everybody. So you mentioned, and I think you're right, I think it's an important issue, that's why I want to get it back to it, that we need to make balance, some trade-offs between the different SDGs. And I think you're right. I mean, economists and lawyers, for different reasons, we are used to make these things. Economists prefer the language of trade-offs. Lawyers prefer the language of balances of rights, for instance, right? The balances of values. I think, you know, from that respect, I think that the idea of planetary well-being is more helpful because it helps us to identify that we are looking for here a cohesive, some of you, many of you actually mentioned coherence as one of the features of planetary well-being. And I think, and I pointed out that that was interesting because I think that one of the risks, if you have these 17 SDGs, is to think that they are just separate things, right? And that we care about all of them, but they are just separate goals that we have. It's not clear what to do when there is a conflict between them, and there are many conflicts between them. And second, it's not so clear the interdependence of many of them, and we know that many of them are interdependent. We are not going to deal effectively with some SDGs if we don't achieve a sufficient level in other SDGs, and so on and so forth. So I think one of the challenges I think we have when we accept the framework of the SDGs with our proposal of planetary well-being or another, one of the challenges is to work on how we can get a right balance between these SDGs globally, not being biased in the north-south divide, as we said before, globally, and also regarding each of the SDGs. So I think there's no other way. As a teacher of democratic theory, I think we cannot give up democracy. I think the only way to achieve these SDGs is actually through democracy. If anybody is so much optimistic to believe that non-democratic countries will do better in achieving these SDGs, I think they are wrong, and I would be happy to discuss this with anybody. But let's now open the discussion. Let's just take different words. I saw you before. Yes.
Sorry, guys. I just need to address something that we have in the chat because it was sent from the University of Nova, that regarding question that as to what role a generation plays, it's important to kind of note that you have a role as consumers and voters. That was the comment, which I need to finish off and saying it is a limited role, in my opinion, because you're voting for very non-diverse options on one side, and as consumers, you don't have the sustainable options that you're supposed to have offered by the companies. So your choice is very limited by default too. In my opinion, in everything that I've been teaching and speaking to our students, yes, there is a choice, but it's a lot of pressure on you for not much choice and very limited impact. I don't believe that's the way to go, to put the responsibility on students or general people as consumers and voters. It's far-fetched for me. So I don't know if you have a comment.
Okay.
Yes, thank you. I'm John Pedersen from University of Gothenburg. I'm heading in the Gothenburg Center for Sustainable Development. So what we are trying to do is much the same, but we are not using the term planetary well-being. So of course, I have a lot of questions. I will not bring them up now, but I think there are a lot of things to discuss. And I'm wondering about sort of the pros and cons of using this concept. And if I start to compare, of course, we have the agenda. It's very useful for, in practice, it's easy to gather people around common goals. And I understand that we need these long-term goals, and you are aiming at planetary well-being, while we are saying we are aiming for sustainability, or a state of that is sustainable, that we can do long-term. Can you comment on your experience of using planetary well-being and make a bit of a comparison with the case that we are trying to use?
Yes, you're most certainly welcome to hear my opinion about that. I've been working with the term sustainability in law and economics for the last 7 years, more or less, very deeply. What is sustainable is not always well. You can have a certain system of production that's not making everybody well off and that is not enhancing well-being. It is just not destroying that much. So what is sustainable can be carried out in long term and can be repeated, but it doesn't say anything about the quality of life or services or ways of being that it provides. It is sustainable. Yes, it's not going to kill us, but is it making us happy? Is it making the society enhance the benefit? Not necessarily. It's just sustainable, right? So that's why I would shy away from using it as an exact synonym, the planetary well-being and sustainability, because in my opinion, from all the disciplines that I'm dealing with, they carry very much different notions underneath them. That would be my 5 cents. So.
And I would add to this that in our experience, when we have explained the idea of planetary well-being in different contexts, as we're doing today or yesterday. So on the one hand, I think that the fact that it's a new concept, it attracts attention, and that's a good thing, because for good or for bad, when you speak about sustainability, then you have the crowds that are totally in favor of what you're going to say, and the crowds who are just disconnecting because they are not interested about this. And I think, connecting with what Lela was saying, when you start a conversation using this concept, which is the aim is to be wider, of course, than sustainability, and incorporate all these other. So as I said yesterday and today, I went through too quick on this, but basically the idea of well-being is to integrate all the areas of value in the life of human beings and non-human beings. So that opens a discussion about what things are things of value for human beings and so on, and that's what we should answer when we ask what well-being is. But as Lela was saying, sustainability, of course, it's a must when we care about the other things that give value to our lives. Because unless we care about sustainability, then everything will be over. So in the long run, there will be no value at all. So sustainability is a must, but it's, if you allow me, it's an adjective that you can put to all the other areas of value. The areas of value are the ends. Sustainability cannot be the only end. Sustainability of what, right? So the sustainability is something, is an adjective that you apply to certain things that give you value. And yes, we all should care and make sure that we pursue these values in a sustainable way. But again, it's an adjective. And the thing is, when we refer to well-being, we are looking at the values that are at the ends that we should pursue, fully compatible with the idea of sustainability, because again, this refers to what we have been talking about in other questions as well, about this integral or holistic approach, realizing that when we care about all these dimensions, the answer that we give to each of them needs to be coherent with the answer that we give to others, because otherwise we will be just, inflicting or falling into contradictions, right, in our strategies. So we feel that on the one hand, the expression of planetary well-being has this advantage of being a new thing that attracts attention. The immediate question that everyone makes is, what do you mean by planetary well-being? That's good, actually, to start a conversation, because you avoid all the assumptions, good, positive, or negative, that other expressions might have. On the other hand, we feel that it's a more comprehensive and wider notion that might help us in order to make these kind of balances or trade-offs that we need to do when we care about all the other things.
I have another sort of follow-up question.
Yeah.
Something that hasn't been mentioned yet today. I think it should be mentioned in almost every meeting, the term or the idea of leaving no one behind, which is really quite a central part of Agenda 2030. Could you perhaps briefly comment on how you think about it in the concept of planetary well-being?
About the idea of not leaving anyone behind. I think the idea for us, it is incorporated in this a notion of the global scope of planetary well-being, right? So there are plenty of discussions. One of the things that because as I said, we have been working on this for 4 years, we have had an endless number of meetings and discussions with different colleagues from different disciplines, first on how to define planetary well-being, what we meant by it, what should we do. I mean, you can imagine the kind of initiatives that I guess that are similar to the ones that you have had, even if you have used other expressions or languages. So whenever we have discussed about these things, one of the discussions we had, for instance, these are open discussions. So we don't pretend, or we don't want, our intention is not to close any of these debates. On quite the contrary, we feel that this should put an agenda, for instance, a research agenda in front of us about how to understand better all these concepts and these values that are behind it. And one of the discussions that refer to how we understand this idea of not leaving anyone behind. So, I mean, the direct answer and the obvious answer would be, okay, this is a global value. That global meaning this is a value for everyone. We should care about the well-being of everyone in the world. But the question, and the example I was going to put is, okay, who is everyone here? Are we talking about only human beings? No, many people want to say, no, animals, non-human animals, we should also care about them. Their well-being is also important to us, right? Actually, we should help them and protect them, because we have created a world that is hostile to them, and we are responsible for their well-being in a way. But of course, this triggers discussions about what to do with plants or vegetables or trees, or when we refer to ecosystems, what is the value that is behind the ecosystem? And all these things, we don't want to close any of these debates. We want to have the debates, and we want to invite everybody to share their perspective. So there is a simple answer to your question, which is, okay, not leaving anyone behind means having this global approach, not the narrow national approach that we might have at some point, but having this global planetary approach in which everyone counts. But these are still leaves some questions open, and we should discuss about them, definitely.
I have a straightforward answer in regards to our microcosmos. Why I agree with Jose Luis heavily to take a look at the global overview. And planetary well-being in those functions is supported by the crazy network that the UPF has of sending out teachers and students and bringing them back. It's an experience, it's a network. It changes their way of thinking. It changes the question in the classroom, and it changes the quality of the classroom. All of those exchanges. But I want to focus on the microcosmos of planetary well-being and the UPF, of how this idea of leaving nobody behind is implemented. The diversity strategies, practices, and policies at the UPF of including also students that would otherwise be excluded helps them access the knowledge. The UPF open a new concept where we're opening the classrooms back, of bringing people that are already in their professional lives, taking courses in the field of sustainability, broadening our network of knowledge, sending them back out is inclusivity. Citizen science, opening the debates, our researchers being at conferences and congresses that are not purely scientific, that are basically discussions, brings once again the attention to what the UPF is doing to search for more information and for help. We're not doing one thing to have this thing of, wow, leaving no one behind. It is about acting in every single manner and in many strategies in a way of saying everyone is welcome, we want to do this together. And we did that like that. So beyond the UPF, also in other courses that we're teaching, outside of the university, it's always this idea of even bringing back alumni in the classroom, of saying, please welcome us in this change. And that is a different way of seeing things. And to me, that is also not leaving anyone behind in that sense. So in my microcosmos, that's kind of an expression of what José Luis Martí said in the grand scheme of things. Thank you.
Who else wants? Yes, you're next. Who else wants to make a question or comment? Okay, another one.
Maybe we should just order lunch here.
Yeah. No, let's take all the comments and questions that you want to do. Yes, go ahead, please.
Hi, I'm a master's student at UPF in law. So for me, having lawyers, experienced in law doing this kind of thing is great. Because in my prior university, well, in the law department, nothing like this existed. So I think it's great. I think my question goes right back to the beginning about the role of universities, because I think the Planetary Wellbeing is an excellent, fantastic initiative. But for me, it seems so far very internal and focused on courses and the sustainability of the university and bringing their carbon emissions down, which is obviously super important. But for me, I feel the role of a university is to sort of guide and lead in this sort of policy direction, because as a lawyer kind of mindset, I do feel that that's where the change is going to happen, with governments working at an international level to coordinate their policies in order to bring emissions down and stop deforestation, et cetera, et cetera. So I wanted to know what your plans were or what your vision is for planetary well-being as an initiative, kind of extrapolating it and influencing outside of the university.
Thank you. We will come back to this later, but let's take all the questions together. There was one person back there. Anyone else wants to intervene?
Hi, I am an elementary school teacher, and right now I'm doing a master's in educational sciences on top. And what I think, a lot of people are talking about the education of the SDGs in universities, but I think we should go more broad, and maybe we should already start educating the SDGs on a way younger age. And I think we should already start with elementary education, because I did a project about the SDGs with 12-year-olds, and they were so motivated and they were so enthusiastic, and they made up so many good ideas and projects. But I think we're only listening to adults, and I don't think that's good enough. So we're always saying, like, we have to get in touch with people in universities, but not everyone is going to university. So I think we're missing out a very big population of people who is not going to get involved in this topic, in this discussion. So I think by implementing the SDGs on a younger age in systems like elementary schools and high schools, I think we're getting a way broader population, and that the people over there can help as well, although they're younger than us. But I think we should implement this on a way younger age as well.
I think anyone else wants to raise any question? No. Let me start, and you have the last word. I mean, both questions are great. All the questions or comments were great. So starting with the last one, the obvious answer, or if that was not a question, it was a comment, and I fully agree with what you said. Just I would add that, of course, we are a university, and then what we are wondering is what can we do as a university to contribute to the promotion of SDGs and planetary well-being, and that, if you want to add. Yeah.
I think because the universities are providing teacher trainings, I think that as a university, you are responsible for making your teacher trainings more inclusive and teaching your teachers in the making how they should implement the SDGs in their own classrooms, although they're working with 6-year-olds, although they're working with 15-year-olds.
Yes.
But it's still university's responsibility to make the teachers of the future ready for this challenge. And in this way, the university is responsible for it as well.
Sure, absolutely. I think you're totally right. I was going to add another thing, another responsibility we might have. We might also help in developing good teaching materials.
Yes.
I think it was not a way out and say, that's not our business or our sector. No, I think you're right. And there are many ways in which universities can contribute to that education that should happen at the primary level or higher in the high school. So totally, I totally agree with that. Even if you let me add my experience with university students, you're totally right that this is only a microcosmos of the whole society. Not everyone is in the university, even less at the master's level. But my experience with at least those who arrive at the university is that they are fully aware of the problems. They are quite well informed, and they know about the urgency and the necessity of tackle all these issues and changing many things in our societies. They are fully aware. So if some of you were present yesterday or could follow the inauguration, you could probably remember that I mentioned an example that I will explain later in the session at 2 p.m. with my students. My personal experience is that they know all what they need to know, or most of what they need to know about the problems. Of course, you can always learn more. The problem is that they are hopeless. They are very pessimistic. They think that nothing will change. We will have another COP and 26 more COPs and nothing will change. They are very pessimistic about the possibilities of doing real changes in the world. So it's not as much a matter of a deficit in the education, at least with those people who arrive at the university. They know about the problem. It's a problem that has to do with the hope they have. And regarding the policy and more practical issues that you asked, I think you are taking the master in European global law. So if you chose my subject next semester, you will have a great dose of discussions about this. But you're totally right. We focused in this presentation, we focused more on the academic part. I just briefly mentioned that we are transforming this area there to build this hub. Well, the main idea for the Center of Studies for Planetary Wellbeing will be to have direct impact on governing institutions, political institutions. So it will be a research, advanced research, but it will be necessarily oriented to having this impact on policies and changes. And that's a challenge because for university, we are not used to work in that way. But that's the only way we think we can organize things for the future. So I think you're totally right, because that's the big gap that we identify now. In terms of pure research, I think in science is doing reasonably well. The problem is how to fill this gap with what political institutions do.
Let me just fastly finish because we're going to get kicked out of the room. I just wanted to add to you, we're already doing those things. Like Jose Luis just said, we were focused on the framework and had a bit of a discussion, but our researchers are already doing that, working with working groups outside, working with the European Commission. The only problem is that it's not seen because it's not put together in one working group and in one setting. But now with the research center, those groups and those researchers are going to have a connecting node where you have the experience of saying, we informed this policy, we helped here, we did this report, so we're doing it. But that's just not teaching, it's our research and then connection with the policy. But that would be my answer. Everyone, thank you so much for sharing these 2 hours with us. Thank you for sharing your opinions. I wish you a wonderful afternoon and join us in 2 hours if you're interested in the courses and the studies and etc., how we developed the plan and how we inserted planetary well-being in teaching. Thank you very much. Have a wonderful afternoon.